The alarm went off before sunrise, sharp and unforgiving, slicing straight through the thin walls of the apartment. She sat up instantly, heart racing, because today wasn't allowed to start slowly. Today had to be perfect. She swung her legs off the mattress, toes touching the cold floor, and for a moment she let herself breathe. One deep breath. Then another. She whispered to herself that this was the day things changed. The mirror over the sink showed a young woman trying very hard not to look afraid. She smoothed her hair back with careful fingers, adjusted the borrowed blazer that still smelled faintly of someone else's perfume, and checked the crease in her pants like it was a lifeline. Every detail mattered. The interview downtown wasn't just a chance, it was the chance. The kind people talked about years later and said, that's when everything turned around. On the tiny kitchen table sat a manila folder, edges bent from being opened too many times. Inside were copies of her resume, printed at the library after 3 failed attempts because the printer kept jamming. She had memorized every word on those pages, every bullet point, every achievement she'd fought for while balancing classes, part-time jobs, and a home where money was always the loudest voice in the room. Her phone buzzed with a reminder notification. Interview. 9 a.m. Her stomach tightened. She locked the apartment door behind her and stepped into the early morning air. The city was already awake, moving with its usual indifference. People hurried past her at the bus stop, eyes forward, headphones in, minds elsewhere. She checked the time again. She had planned this down to the minute. 1 bus, 2 stops on the train, then a 10-minute walk. No room for mistakes. As the bus rumbled toward downtown, she stared out the window, watching neighborhoods shift from cracked sidewalks to clean glass buildings. She rehearsed answers in her head. Strengths. Weaknesses. Why this company? Why her? She imagined herself sitting straight in the chair, confident but not arrogant, smiling but not too much. The bus stopped near a crowded intersection, and she stepped off, smoothing her jacket as she joined the flow of people heading toward the train station. The building where her interview was scheduled rose in the distance, all steel and confidence, catching the morning light like it knew it was important. She glanced at her watch. Still on time. That's when she heard it. At first, it was barely noticeable, swallowed by traffic noise and impatient footsteps. A low, strained sound. Someone coughing. Someone struggling. She slowed without meaning to, eyes scanning the sidewalk. Near the edge of the bus stop bench sat an old man, hunched forward, his coat too thin for the chill, one hand gripping a worn wooden cane while the other pressed against his chest. His breathing was shallow and uneven, each inhale a small battle. People passed him without looking. One woman wrinkled her nose and stepped around him. A man muttered something about being late and checked his phone. She stopped. Her mind split in 2 directions instantly. The building. The time. The interview. Then the man. The way his shoulders shook. The way his eyes searched the crowd like he was hoping someone, anyone, would see him. She took a step forward then froze. She checked her watch again. 7 minutes until she needed to be inside the lobby. Security was strict. Late meant gone. No second chances. Someone brushed past her shoulder. Don't get involved, they said under their breath, not even slowing down. She swallowed. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. A bus hissed as its doors opened and closed. The city kept moving. She walked toward him anyway. Excuse me, she said softly, crouching down so she was at eye level. Are you okay? His eyes lifted slowly. They were tired but sharp, like he was used to noticing things others missed. Just need a minute, he rasped. Haven't eaten today. Her chest tightened. She glanced toward the building again. It was so close now she could see the reflection of clouds in its windows. Do you feel dizzy? She asked. He nodded slightly, his grip on the cane tightening. Didn't mean to cause trouble. You're not, she said quickly. Stay right here. She dug into her bag, fingers moving fast, and pulled out her water bottle. She unscrewed the cap and held it up to him. Small sips. He hesitated, then drank. His hands shook. She looked around, searching for help. No one stopped. No one even slowed. Her phone came out of her pocket. No signal. Of course. She stood up, scanning the street. Across the road was a small cafe, its windows fogged, a line of people inside. She looked at her watch again. 5 minutes. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to decide for her. "I'll be right back," she told him. "I promise." She ran. The bell above the cafe door jingled as she burst inside, breathless. The barista looked annoyed. "Line's back there." "Please," she said, voice tight. "I just need something quick. Soup. Anything." The barista sighed dramatically but took her money. She tapped her foot as the seconds dragged, eyes glued to the door like it might close on her future. She grabbed the paper cup the moment it was handed to her and sprinted back outside. The old man was still there. Relief washed over her as she knelt again, carefully helping him drink. Color slowly returned to his face. His breathing eased, just a little. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But I wanted to." She glanced at her watch again. Late. The word hit her harder than she expected. A sharp, sinking realization that there was no fixing this now. No running fast enough. No excuse good enough. The building loomed behind her, taller than before, like it was watching. She helped him sit back comfortably, adjusting his coat. "Are you going to be okay if I leave?" He nodded. "Thanks to you." She stood slowly, heart heavy, and for the first time since the morning began, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what she'd done. She had chosen him. Chosen this moment. And whatever happened next was the cost. She walked toward the building with steady steps, even though her chest felt tight. She straightened her shoulders before stepping into the lobby, letting the glass doors slide shut behind her. The air inside was cool and quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel small. The receptionist barely looked up. "I'm here for the interview," she said. The woman checked the screen, then finally lifted her eyes. Her expression changed instantly. "You're late." "I know," she said calmly. "I'm sorry." The receptionist's lips pressed into a thin line. "You can wait." "But they've already started." She nodded and moved toward the chairs, her folder clutched tightly in her hands. Other candidates glanced at her, then looked away. She could feel their thoughts without hearing them. She sat anyway. Because even though she was late, even though everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers, she refused to believe she'd been wrong for stopping. And as she sat there, waiting in that cold, polished room, she had no idea that the choice she made outside would echo louder than any answer she could have given inside. She sat with her knees pressed together, folder balanced carefully on her lap, eyes fixed on a spot on the polished floor that reflected the ceiling lights like tiny, distant stars. Every tick of the clock on the wall sounded louder than the last. Each second felt like another reminder that she didn't belong there anymore, not in their eyes. A door down the hall opened. Laughter spilled out first. Confident, easy laughter. The kind that came from people who never worried about being late because the world adjusted itself around them. A group of candidates stepped out, suits sharp, smiles relaxed. One of them glanced at her, then whispered something to the person beside him. They both smirked. She looked down at her resume, suddenly aware of every crease, every imperfect edge. Her fingers tightened around the folder, as if letting go would mean losing the last proof that she deserved a seat in this building. The receptionist cleared her throat loudly. Next. A tall man in a dark suit emerged from the hallway, tablet tucked under his arm, jaw tight like he'd already decided how the rest of his day would go. His eyes flicked to the remaining candidates, then landed on her. "You're the late one," he said flatly. "Yes," she replied, standing immediately. "I understand if—" He raised a hand, cutting her off. "We run on schedules here. Time management is basic professionalism." Her throat tightened, but she met his gaze. "I agree. I was delayed because someone needed help." He scoffed softly, not even trying to hide it. There are emergency services for that. This is a corporate environment, not a community center. A few people nearby chuckled. Heat rushed to her face, but she didn't look away. I won't apologize for helping someone who was struggling, she said evenly. Something shifted in his expression, not anger, but annoyance mixed with disbelief. This isn't about your morals. It's about priorities. This was my priority, she replied. Silence followed. The receptionist stared at her like she'd spoken out of turn. The man exhaled sharply, as if she'd confirmed something he already believed. Follow me, he said curtly. The conference room was cold, air-conditioned to the point where her arms prickled beneath the thin fabric of her blazer. A long glass table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs that looked more expensive than anything she owned. 2 other interviewers sat waiting, pens poised, expressions unreadable. He didn't offer her a seat. You're aware you've already made a poor first impression, he began. Yes, she said. And yet, one of the others added, a woman with immaculate hair and a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. You expect us to overlook that? I expect you to listen, she replied quietly. The man let out a humorless laugh. Confidence is admirable. Arrogance is not. Her fingers curled into her palms. I'm not being arrogant. I'm being honest. They exchanged looks. Tell us, the woman said, tapping her pen. Why should we hire someone who can't even arrive on time? She took a breath, steadying herself. Because I show up when it matters. Even when it costs me. The words hung in the air. The man leaned back in his chair. This is business. Decisions here affect millions. Compassion doesn't pay dividends. She felt something spark in her chest, anger, yes, but also clarity. Neither does indifference, she said before she could stop herself. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. The man's eyes hardened. That will be all. Just like that. No follow-up questions. No discussion of her qualifications. No acknowledgement of the years she'd worked to earn this moment. The woman avoided her gaze. Thank you for your time. She nodded once, refusing to let her disappointment show, and turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, like she was walking against the current. In the hallway, the sounds of the office seemed louder now, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, doors opening and closing with purpose. Everyone had somewhere to be. Something important to do. She didn't. As she passed the waiting area, someone muttered, "Should have just minded her own business." Her jaw tightened, but she kept walking. Outside, the city felt harsher. The wind cut through her blazer, carrying the scent of exhaust and impatience. She stood on the steps for a moment, staring at the revolving doors like they might pull her back inside if she waited long enough. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother asking how it went. She didn't reply. Instead, she sat on the steps, folder resting beside her, hands clasped together, as if holding herself upright. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. Crying here felt like letting them win. Across the street, she spotted the bus stop bench again. The old man was gone. For a split second, panic flared. Had something happened after she left? Had she stayed too long? Not long enough? Then she saw him a little farther down the sidewalk, walking slowly but steadily, cane tapping the ground in a calm rhythm. He paused, glanced back toward the building, and for a brief moment, their eyes met across the distance. He gave her a small nod. Something in her chest eased. Still, the weight of what she'd lost pressed down hard. She replayed the scene in the conference room over and over, wondering if she should have said less, smiled more, apologized harder. Wondering if the world had rules she hadn't learned yet, or had learned too well and chosen to break anyway. She stood and started walking, unsure where she was going. The morning sun climbed higher, bright and indifferent, casting sharp shadows that followed her like questions without answers. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She frowned, hesitated, then answered. Hello? Please remain nearby, a calm voice said. We may need to speak with you again. Her heart skipped. About the interview? There was a pause. Just stay close. The call ended. She stood still on the sidewalk, the noise of the city rushing around her, pulse pounding in her ears. She didn't know whether to hope or brace herself for another disappointment. All she knew was that something wasn't finished yet. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the doubt and exhaustion, a quiet certainty remained unshaken. She had done the right thing. Even if the world refused to reward it. She stayed where she was, standing on the edge of the sidewalk like moving an inch might break whatever fragile thread had just been pulled tight. The city kept rushing around her, unaware that her entire future felt suspended in the space between one unanswered question and a ringing phone that had already gone silent. Her fingers trembled slightly as she locked her phone and slipped it back into her bag. Remain nearby. The words echoed in her mind. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just a request that felt heavy with implication. She walked slowly, letting the noise of traffic calm her thoughts. Every instinct told her not to hope. Hope had a way of hurting the most when it rose just enough to see the fall coming. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull back toward the building. Whatever had shifted inside those glass walls wasn't finished with her yet. She crossed the street and paused near a small plaza across from the tower, choosing a bench that gave her a clear view of the entrance. People moved in and out with purpose, assistants carrying coffee, executives speaking sharply into phones, security guards scanning faces. None of them spared her a glance. Minutes passed. Then the doors opened again. This time, the movement inside felt different. Quieter. Tense. A cluster of executives stepped out, their body language stiff, eyes darting as if looking for something, or someone. The same man who had dismissed her earlier stood among them, his confident posture now slightly fractured. And then she saw him. The old man stepped through the doors last, no longer hunched, no longer blending into the background. His coat was gone, replaced by a tailored jacket that fit him perfectly. His cane tapped the marble floor with authority, not necessity. His eyes were sharp, alert, and unmistakably in control. Her breath caught. He scanned the plaza, then spotted her. A smile crossed his face, not polite, not rehearsed, but warm and unmistakably familiar. He raised a hand slightly, beckoning. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She crossed the plaza, heart pounding so loudly she was sure others could hear it. The executives watched her approach, confusion etched across their faces. Some recognized her immediately, and discomfort flickered behind their eyes. "You," one of them muttered under his breath. She stopped a few feet away, unsure whether to speak. The old man broke the silence. "I was hoping you'd still be nearby." "Yes," she said. "You asked me to stay." He nodded approvingly. "You listen well." The man who had cut her interviews short cleared his throat. "Sir, is there a reason?" "There is," the old man said calmly, cutting him off with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. "But we'll discuss it inside." He turned to her. "Would you join us?" She hesitated, glancing at the faces around her. Some were tight with embarrassment. Others with curiosity. A few with irritation. "I don't want to be a problem," she said quietly. The old man's gaze softened. "You've already proven you're not afraid of being uncomfortable for the right reasons." That was enough. They walked back into the building together. The lobby felt different now, as if the air itself had shifted. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The receptionist's eyes widened as she stood abruptly, suddenly unsure of her place in the room. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened to the executive floor, she felt the weight of every step, every choice she'd made that morning pressing down on her. They entered the largest boardroom, sunlight flooding in through floor-to-ceiling windows. The old man took the seat at the head of the table without hesitation. That's when it became undeniable. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a favor. This was deliberate. "I owe you an explanation," he said, folding his hands on the table. "And so do some others in this room." No one spoke. "This morning," he continued, "I sat outside this building without my title, without my name, and without any indication of who I am. I wanted to see something. One executive shifted uncomfortably. Another stared down at the table. I wanted to see how people behave when they believe no one important is watching, he said. Because that is when character speaks the loudest. He turned to her. You were the only one who stopped. Her throat tightened. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, he said gently. That's why it mattered. The man who had dismissed her earlier straightened in his chair. Sir, with respect, our hiring process is exactly what concerns me, the old man replied, his tone calm but firm. You dismissed a candidate not for lack of skill, but for refusing to ignore someone in need. Silence thickened the room. He looked around the table. Do any of you know why she was late? No one answered. She was late because she helped me, he said. Because she chose compassion when there was nothing to gain. A sharp inhale came from the far end of the table. The old man leaned back slightly. Tell me, he said, addressing the room, what kind of company are we trying to build? One that runs on rigid schedules alone, or one that understands the value of humanity? No one met his gaze. He turned back to her. Why did you stop? She swallowed, aware of every eye on her. Because if I'd walked past you, she said, voice steady despite the weight of the moment, I wouldn't have liked the person I was becoming. And no job is worth that. The words landed softly, but decisively. For the first time since she'd entered the building, something shifted in the faces around her. Discomfort gave way to reflection. Judgment to uncertainty. The old man smiled. That answer, he said, is exactly what I was hoping to hear. He stood, slowly, deliberately, and the room followed his movement instinctively. This interview isn't over, he said. It's just begun. Her heart raced. He gestured toward an empty chair beside him. Sit. She did. The executives exchanged glances, realizing the balance of power had quietly but completely changed. The questions that followed were different now, thoughtful, probing, sincere. They asked about her experiences, her values, the choices she'd made when no one was watching. And for the first time that day, they listened. As the sunlight shifted across the room and shadows lengthened, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not victory, not relief, but a deep sense of alignment. Like everything that had felt unfair, uncertain, and exhausting had been leading her to this exact moment. Still, she didn't know how it would end. She only knew that whatever decision came next would no longer be made in ignorance. And as the old man watched her speak, his expression thoughtful and proud, the room held its breath, waiting for the final choice that would define them all. The room felt quieter than before, not because anyone had stopped breathing, but because every sound now carried weight. Pens rested on notepads without moving. The city outside the glass walls continued its restless motion, but inside, time seemed to slow, as if even the building itself was waiting. She answered the last question honestly, the way she had answered all the others. No embellishment. No performance. Just truth shaped by experience. When she finished speaking, she folded her hands in her lap and waited. The old man studied her for a long moment. Not the way an interviewer evaluates a candidate, but the way someone weighs a decision that reaches far beyond a single hire. Finally, he turned his gaze to the others around the table. This morning, he said, I learned more about our company than I have in years. A few executives shifted in their seats. We talk endlessly about values, he continued, his voice calm but unyielding. Integrity. Leadership. Responsibility. Yet when those values walked past us on the sidewalk, most of us didn't even notice. The man who had dismissed her earlier opened his mouth, then closed it again. She was late, the old man said, acknowledging the unspoken defense. Yes. And because of that, some of you decided she was careless. Unprofessional. Unworthy. He paused, letting the words settle. Tell me, he asked, how many of you would trust someone who follows the rules perfectly but lacks the courage to break them when it truly matters? No one answered. He leaned forward slightly. I built this company by taking risks. By making decisions others thought were foolish. By choosing people over profit when the moment demanded it. He gestured toward her. This morning, she did the same. A silence followed, heavier than any argument. The woman with the immaculate hair spoke carefully. Sir, are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, he interrupted gently, that our hiring process needs to recognize character as more than a buzzword. He turned back to her. Stand up. Her heart jumped, but she rose immediately. You came here today expecting an interview, he said. You didn't get one. Instead, you were tested in a way no resume could prepare you for. He reached into the folder in front of him and slid a document across the table. I'd like to offer you the position. For a second, she thought she'd misheard him. I? Her voice caught. She cleared her throat. You mean now? No, he said, smiling. Not because you helped me. But because you showed me who you are when you thought no one important was watching. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. I won't disappoint you. I know, he replied. And neither will this company, if we're willing to learn. He turned to the others. I expect every one of you to reflect on today. Leadership is not about control. It's about responsibility. The meeting ended quietly. No applause. No speeches. Just the sound of chairs sliding back and people standing with new awareness settling into their movements. As she stepped out of the boardroom, the receptionist looked up at her with a completely different expression than before. Unsure. Respectful. Congratulations, the woman said softly. She nodded, still trying to steady her breathing. The elevator ride down felt unreal. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked the same blazer, same tired eyes. But something fundamental had shifted. When the doors opened onto the lobby, sunlight poured in, warm and forgiving. Outside, the city greeted her again. The noise, the motion, the impatience. But it felt different now. Less threatening. More open. Her phone buzzed. She answered immediately. Mom? There was a pause, then a familiar voice filled with worry. How did it go? She smiled, a laugh slipping out before she could stop it. I got the job. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. You're serious? Yes, she said, tears finally spilling over. I really did. Oh, baby, her mother whispered. I knew you would. She ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle into her bones. Not exhaustion, something deeper. A quiet gratitude. Across the street, the old man stood near the plaza, speaking to a driver. When he noticed her, he lifted a hand in acknowledgement. She crossed over, still smiling. I wanted to thank you, she said, for giving me a chance. He shook his head. I didn't give you anything. You earned it long before you walked into that building. She hesitated. Why did you really do it? The test, I mean. He looked out at the city, thoughtful. Because success has a way of insulating people from reality. I needed to know whether we'd forgotten what matters. And? She asked. He smiled. You reminded us. The driver opened the car door. Before stepping inside, he turned back to her. Never let this place change you. I won't, she promised. As the car pulled away, she glanced at her watch again. The same watch she checked 100 times that morning. The minute hand moved steadily forward, no longer a threat. She walked toward the bus stop, not rushing this time. The sidewalk passed beneath her feet, full of strangers, each carrying stories no one else could see. She knew now that life wouldn't always reward kindness so clearly. That not every choice would end with an offer letter and a smile. But she also knew something else, something unshakable. She had missed an interview. But she had shown up for something far greater. And in a world that often measured worth by speed and status, she had learned that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop, and see the person everyone else walks past.